All right, welcome in. We are live for the first time ever. We had some technical difficulties. We've been trying to go live for the last 30 minutes and made some really dumbass mistakes in not knowing how StreamYard works. But we now know how StreamYard works. We're definitely excited to be partnering with Going the Distance. If you don't know us, I am Noah Parker, and my co-host is sitting with me, Jack Wallace. We are not across the country from each other, but you could almost say that we're across the country from each other. Jack is in Syracuse, New York, repping the Orange. I am in Nashville, Tennessee, repping David Bowie today, and we're really excited to start bringing you all the Blanket Coverage podcast. We're gonna have some updated branding for ourselves as we go along. But today is the college football preview, and these are always our biggest episodes. 2 years running, this has been our biggest episode, either this or the NFL preview, which will
college
be
basketball
coming next
too.
week.
That one's always a big one, and NBA. Those are the big four, if I like to call it. Those are the big
four. Well, we don't do previews for anything else, and previews are our biggest episodes. We're excited. We're going to be bringing you some gambling content. I'm going to have a few little gambling nuggets to throw in here and there. But without further ado, let's get started. Jack, where do you want to take us first in the college football preview?
Well, the first thing we're going to look at, and mind you, we're going to be doing this a little bit like last season's. If you haven't seen that, we still have at Blanket Coverage. There's all sorts of things we have. We'll have blurbs up at periodic points throughout the podcast that y'all can check out, and they will be down there. The current ones, as you can see on your screen, they're GTD Sports with all the ones on their own social media accounts. Those will be things that we'll be looking at and putting on content as well. But there are a lot of old archive stuff on Blanket Coverage from there. But one of the ones we did back in 2020 was talking about the impact of COVID-19, which, as all of you are very fully aware, is not over yet. And so there are some still pretty solid changes going on in the college football world. Now, mind you, it's way less than last year. As of now, we are still planning on doing full 12-season schedules for every conference. So we're not having the whole debacle of Big Ten, Pac-12 waiting. We're still looking to have all that in a row. The Big Ten did announce, though, that any and all games that are called off to COVID cases will not be rescheduled. So we're starting to see some of that. I think the Pac-12 may have confirmed that. I don't know. But some leagues are starting to get on that train of saying, at this point, if you're not vaccinated up, if you're not masking, if you're not doing whatever that's preventing cases, or even if you're just preventing cases in general, no matter what you're doing, we're not going to give you that benefit of the doubt anymore. So rescheduling games seems to be something off, which is a new take on it and an interesting one. And we'll see what happens with a lot of teams coming forward. Obviously, a lot of these schools are private universities and don't need to release any information. We've seen a lot of professional leagues releasing stuff. I know we'll mention this in the NFL preview again, but my Atlanta Falcons are the first team, and I still think the only so far, with 100% vaccination rate. And that'll, we would hope, to slow down spreads within teams. But so far on that end, it looks like that's where COVID's going to stand. Most teams, I know TCU included, of course, our alma mater, will be opening up their stands 100% for the fans coming up in only a couple days. So looks like they're starting to do that. A lot of schools around the country did that last week in week 0, but it's looking to be an exciting year.
And shout out to the most unlikely team to be 100% vaccinated, the Ole Miss Rebels.
That is true. I did see that.
100% vaccinated. I saw a very funny tweet. I wish I could find the tweet right now, but I saw a very funny tweet that said how many tutors got vaccines for the players.
I have probably a shocking amount, but
probably too many. Way too many.
Up next, we're going to talk about a couple of changes going on. Again, this whole section, I guess, is about changes we're doing. Stadiums. We had a bunch last season, which ended up being not very exciting because many of them didn't have any fans. This year, only one. Birmingham, UAB, which actually is playing right now against Jacksonville State. they get a new stadium, which is only meaningful because Legion Field, the very famous, long standing field in Birmingham, was, and decades was one of the original sites of the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama, and is now no longer UAB's field after all this time. They have a new field called Protective Field, sponsored by Protective, and it is a really cool looking stadium, actually. So shout out to UAB for getting a nice new stadium and finally getting out of Legion Field. In terms of coaching changes, there actually were a lot of them, so I only put down some of the ones I think are going to be kind of the big ones here. Biggest one, I think, by far, and I think is not a shocking take, Steve Sarkisian from Alabama on to UT. Obviously, did a little bit in the NFL, too, with the Falcons, which we don't want to talk about, and then we now is back to UT. Big splash in the Big 12. Next up on here, we're just going to go down the list, and then I'll get the takes on. Next up is Brian Harsin, going from Boise State, where he accomplished a lot, as you can see, Boise State over the last decade and a half, going to be the new head coach at Auburn. And then Gus Malzahn, who, leaving Auburn, is now on to UCF, which is an interesting downgrade, upgrade. And then Brett Bielema. I would say in a way, after the whole Peach Bowl thing, I'd say it's an upgrade. And then Brett Bielema, which went from Arkansas and I wrote /unemployed. What?
Bielema. Brett Bielema.
Does he done anything worth even accomplishing a name pronunciation right? Because now he's at Illinois, and he went from unemployed to Illinois.
Hey, he beat Nebraska. They beat the doors off of Nebraska.
That's not an accomplishment, and you know it.
But yeah, I know. Did you see the side note? Did you see the opening? We're gonna just get our Nebraska hate out of the way right now, because it came up.
It's almost pity at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it hate. It's more just like we're laughing at you. We're laughing,
and not to bring it, not to put a shot on, but I've felt a little bit like that with Tennessee the last while too, because they're both the big time '90s programs that have just.
I felt like that with Tennessee 90s. Too. Hey, I live here.
A little bit. A little bit.
I feel that with Tennessee too. No. Did you see Scott Frost? And Scott Frost was supposed to be the Nebraska Golden Boy, right? He's supposed to be the guy there. He said, after we saw the way that they lined up on defense, it took about half of our game plan out. What was your game plan? How bad was your game plan?
This is
game one. The whole offseason. This is game one. Also, how is half of your game plan or most of your game plan dependent on how the other team lines up? I realize that is important, but what team coached by Brett Bielema in the state of Illinois is going to throw you for a loop that bad as supposedly an offensive guru head coach? That your game plan just gets completely thrown out the window when they come out in, I guess, I didn't read too much into the quote, but I guess they came out in an even front or an odd front when Nebraska was expecting the other. And look, you've got a game plan for both because teams can do anything. I mean, I watched a documentary, The Two Bills, last night about Belichick and Bill Parcells. And I mean, Bill Belichick was talking about how they had to shift tendencies all the time. So you've got to be prepared in the chess match as a head coach to be able to shift tendencies like that on the fly. When another team shifts their tendency, you've got to be able to react and respond. And clearly this Nebraska coaching staff wasn't ready for that. And that's kind of a cornerstone of coaching at a high level in football.
Especially for a head coach that we know can do really well with teams that aren't exactly with a million degrees of talent. And yes, I know that 2021 Nebraska is not a team filled to the brim with talent, but you still should be doing a lot better. I mean, look at what he accomplished at UCF. He made them into a national champion, which, yes, I'm still going to agree with that. But he made them all the way from them to then doing what at Nebraska? Absolutely nothing. And it's sort of sad. And next couple of guys, Shane Beamer. If you recognize the last name, that means that you know at least a little bit about college football. Son of legendary Frank Beamer with Beamer ball at Virginia Tech. He was a tight end guy at UGA and OU for some time. And now he's off to USC.
I have a note on this. Did you see that graduate assistant coach Zeb Noland will start week 1
for
the Gamecocks.
And yes, USC was in reference to South Carolina. I didn't specify that, but yes, the same team. It's interesting.
That's bad.
That's
not good, Jack. That's like really not good. And
well,
Zeb
Nolan,
like 2
quarterbacks on the roster.
He transferred away from South Carolina, then went to North Dakota State, where he got beat out by his backup at North Dakota State last year in the absence of Trey Lance.
It's pretty tough.
Like, North Dakota State fans were calling for this guy's head. And now he goes to Columbia, South Carolina. Oh, this is such a disaster. And I'm not saying that Shane Beamer can't do it in Columbia, right? What I am saying is that I really think this could be a Matt Rule situation where you've just got to have a purge year.
Well, just have a purge. It's a year zero.
It's a year zero. It's a purge year. Yes. I would not be surprised if this team wins like one game. If they're the worst team in the SEC, that is not going to shock me whatsoever.
Maybe not.
No, if we're going to have to look at their schedule. I have not taken a look at their schedule.
That's why I say pump the brakes a little bit.
But I'm pretty sure their over-under is like 3 or like 2.5. This team is not going to be good.
No, but their first game of the year is hosting Eastern Illinois. And so it's like,
competitive game for the Gamecocks.
At Georgia. Then it's Kentucky, Troy, at Tennessee, Vanderbilt, at A&M, Florida, at Missouri, Auburn, Clemson.
Look, Stephen Garcia and Marshawn Lattimore aren't walking out of the locker room anymore.
I'll never.
You got graduate assistant coach Zeb Nolan at quarterback. Let's move on. We could talk.
I think they could get 2 or 3. I think they could get 2 or 3 out of that. But you still have Vanderbilt.
We could talk for years about bad teams. I think Vandy is going to be better than South Carolina. I really like what Clark Lee is doing.
That's fair, though. He kind of has had his year zero already. If you want to,
hired Barton Simmons, recruiting expert, as a GM of the team, basically to handle recruiting as a recruiting coordinator. I don't know why more teams in college football don't do this.
And a great transition you made there, too, because Clark Lee went from Notre Dame over to Vanderbilt. He was the last guy I had on here because he wasn't a head coach. But I do think that's a pretty significant move, getting a guy from Notre Dame who did very well for the Fighting Irish, now off to the Commodores down in Tennessee, in Nashville, too. So, yeah, I think that's I think there's some significant moves. I mean, obviously, we haven't seen a decent Vanderbilt team since the early James Franklin days, which, how I miss those. But those are some wonderful times, seeing Vanderbilt actually being like a good team. Like
Vandy had their first 9-win season since the World War II.
And they were good. They were legitimately competitive.
So when I was in high school, we actually used to go over and practice at Vanderbilt Stadium every now and then. We actually played in it a couple times versus Knox Catholic, which had Amari Rogers and Cade Mays, among some other guys. I quickly noticed, but the first thing I noticed about Vanderbilt Stadium is that they don't just have the bowls that they've won. They haven't won any championships.
I've been before, so I know. But
they don't just have the bowls that they've won. They have every bowl that they've ever been to in the stadium.
And it's not a big stadium.
And there aren't a lot of them.
No.
We'll have to see with Clark Lee out of Vanderbilt. But just out of curiosity,
they came here to play school.
Just out of curiosity, before we move on and cover some more meat and potatoes stuff, who do you think is going to have the best year out of any first-year head coach? And I have my answer.
With the talent that these guys can have, it's kind of tough for me because I think you can automatically get Beamer off the board because, again, it's you have such an early year. I don't trust Sarkisian, and we'll get to this later because I have previews for the
I'm in the same boat.
I don't trust him there because Iowa State is reaching the crest of their – I don't even want to say comebacks. They've never really been here, so their ascension. And then OU, I think that's one of the best OU teams we've seen in a while, which we'll get to that later again. And then – again, Harsin, I like the move. I think he's good, but there's just so much talent in the SEC West. They're not going to do anything, and I don't really think that's Harsin's fault, though. I just think it's the fact that, you're not going to be better than A&M. You're not going to be better than Bama. You probably won't be better than LSU. I mean, there are a lot of that's hard. So maybe it's Malzahn. I think USC can get there. That's UCF. Sorry, I think that UCF could end up being one of the better, maybe not the best out of all these teams we've mentioned here, but they could be one of the best.
And in the American, we're going to talk about it. It's kind of a toss-up aside from Cincinnati, because you've got Cincinnati returning like 93% of their
they're going to be elite
on offense. They're going to be really good again. But other than that, it's kind of up for grabs. And I believe in Gus Malzahn. I think he's inconsistent. I think he takes years on, years off. But I am a believer in Gus Malzahn, and what the Cover 3 podcast on CBS deemed the putt-putt offense, because they just kind of putt-putt down the field. But it works. It works.
Auburn's the eternally 8-4 team, and if you're going 8-4 in the SEC West,
Auburn's offense was it was like the pinnacle of modernity in the early 2010s when they were going to national championships. And SEC championships and competing. But Gus Malzahn, let's not forget, has probably, and I don't have this up right now, but he has, I think, beaten Saban more than any other coach currently coaching.
I think that is true, yeah.
I think that would be true. So if UCF wants Bama, they got their guy for it, is all I'm going to say. And we're going to leave it at that because – oh boy, we could get into that. So Jack, we got some new guys on campus. Who are the freshmen that you want to watch this year?
So I got 5 guys up on my board here. And again, this is also, I put in top freshmen to watch, and watch is a very loose term because some of these people here may not actually end up getting much playing time this year, but are more names that you would want to keep track of in the news, because these are going to be people that I think will either get significant playing time this season or next, because some of these guys may be pushed to next season, some maybe we don't know yet. But these are going to be names that I think will be much bigger talking points over the next few months. First one is a name that if you're following college football, you already know pretty well. Quinn Ewers, Ohio State quarterback, got moved from the 2022 class into the 2021 class, wanted to enroll early at Ohio State to reap those NIL benefits, and is already doing pretty well. So he actually is the number 1 player across the board. Really likely to hold the job next season. CJ Stroud already will have the starting job for Ohio State. That's been confirmed. So he's going to start the year at least. But I think Quinn could get some playing time down the stretch. This guy's really, really solid. Even if he doesn't end up getting much, we know the redshirt rules mean that you still can play a little bit. So maybe he does that. Though I don't know how likely that is. But again, considering benefits from NIL, maybe redshirts go up, which is actually, I think, an interesting thing we can look at this season. Is how is redshirting going to get affected by NIL stuff? Because you're still there in college doing what you can, but you can get another year to play. So I'd love to see the rates on that. Next up, USC edge Corey Foreman. Oh boy, this guy is nuts. And again, all these people, go watch their tape, go watch their highlights. I went through highlights with all these people. It has been really fun. But Corey is crazy, right? Number 2 overall national any player. He is the best edge rusher and the best player from California in his class. He is an absolute monster on the edge here, but he's going to have to get used to some of the bigger sizes from college, but it is absolutely nuts to just see how fast that he can shred any kind of block. It's been very impressive. We're not talking
that big. He's in the Pac-12.
That's true too. He'll do well on that end.
This will be this podcast. Look, we're not going to be objective here. This podcast will have slander of all sorts, in all conferences. But the Pac-12 being the number 1 slander-laden conference here.
He's got very quick feet too, especially for his size. So watch out for that. JoJo Earl. It's E-A-R-L-E. I'll just go JoJo. He is a very, very, very solid wide receiver. Flipped from LSU to Alabama. Very, very, very fast. Plays almost like a quick running back in situations. I've seen a lot of dump offs, a lot of screens to him. Could watch out for him for a potential breakout season. We know Alabama is the constant wide receiver factory, and you can just add his name in the list there too. He is 5'9.5", so he's a little shorter on the end. He's number 6 wide receiver, number 47 nationally. But I just thought his tape looked really, really nice. I think he could be a big-time guy this season. Next up, Travion Henderson, Ohio State running back. Now, this guy may not get as much playing time this season simply because Ohio State's running back room is, unheard of good.
Ohio State's offense is stacked this year.
Yeah, the whole offense is crazy, but the running back room is something I think is almost underrated because we know that Chris Olave, then we have Stroud and all these big guys on that end, but the running back position is almost underrated, which sounds difficult to imagine with how good it is. But Henderson is the number one running back recruit in 2021. He's a very agile running back, quick cuts, jukes, and hurdles, quick feet, excellent vision, and I love his speed. So he's a guy that's going to be your quick back in the backfield, your elusive back, to use your Madden term. And I think that he can be a great asset to this Ohio State team that's going to need a lot of quick guys on it. And the last guy, keeping it in the Big Ten, Kalen King, at Penn State, a cornerback. So getting a secondary guy in here. May not start right away, though. The Penn State defense is going to be very elite this season, but he has a great size and very good athleticism. So I really like King. A lot of stuff from him has been very solid. Penn State getting some really solid recruits over the last while. So looking forward to seeing more of that.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to some award watch list type of stuff. And I think we should just pick a winner. I think we should just go ahead, make a prediction. Keep in mind, I don't want to make a prediction for the Heisman, however, because the Heisman winner the last 5 years has been towards the bottom of the list on odds. So I think you could feel pretty comfortable that none of these guys are going to win the Heisman. They might be in there, but I don't like any of these guys to win the Heisman. Quite honestly, I don't see it with Spencer Rattler. That's for sure. I don't like his I don't like his persona. I don't like the way he carries himself. I think he plays turnover prone, and we'll see if Lincoln Riley can develop him in this offense. But I don't know why everyone's so high on Spencer Rattler as the number one pick. I know, as the Heisman winner. I know he came along strong last year, but I don't see it. I don't see it with Rattler. So who are some other guys that we could see in New York winning the Heisman this year?
I think the ACC is going to be a big conference to watch this season for a lot of reasons. And I think, and this has a point, I'm getting back to it, but one of the biggest parts of it
that's a hot take.
No, but I think it will. And the reason why is because Sam Howell and De'Aaron King are two of the biggest. If you want to talk about what conference has the top two out of the top 5-10 kind of quarterbacks that are going to be in this list, I think those two are going to be top two going around there. And I think
what has De'Aaron King done on a football field to make you think that?
I think he can get there. I think this Miami team has potential to win the Coastal because, again, the Coastal isn't that good this season.
We're betting on the
there's UNC.
Are you betting on the sixth straight year of De'Aaron King being the best year of De'Aaron King? I'm not.
I never said that. I never said that he's not going to get there, but I don't know. I think that it's possible for that to happen. Again, I'm betting more on Sam Howell anyway. I'm not on the Miami side here, but I'm saying that I think he can step it up and be a very solid quarterback for this team. Also, Breece Hall, if you want to have a crazy dark horse pick, I think him at Iowa State at running back has the potential to go off. I think he could be one of, not the. I think he may be the best running back in the country this season. He's my pick to win the Doak Walker Award. I know Isaiah Spiller and Muhammad Ibrahim for Minnesota, Spiller for Texas A&M. I think those are two really good backs too. So yeah, not looking at the ACC because I know the ACC had a couple of studs at North Carolina with running back last year, but I think that it's going to be more outside of that. So sorry to skip ahead on that end, but I think Breece Hall could be one of those dark horse picks, but I still think it'd be more likely to be a Rattler or Sam Howell. It's just going to be dependent on team because if Oklahoma ends up being as good as I think they are, then Rattler's going to be a lot higher on that list. Same thing with UNC. They got to close out. They got to win big. And then I think Howell has it way better for him. As you've seen it too. It's kind of how it works where you have to have that team level being that elite and that good. You don't have to win the national title, win the Heisman, of course, but you do have to get up in a contender level team. And I do think that a lot of these teams are kind of dependent on that where, UNC's in prime position to do it, but can they actually do it? We don't know yet. Unlike Clemson and Trevor Lawrence last year that, you were kind of shoehorned to do it.
I agree with that. I just think I'm so out on De'Aaron King. I'm so out on the Miami Hurricanes. It happens year after year after year. We talk about, oh, well, Miami, could they be back? Is the U back? And then they bring out the turnover chain for like the first 3 games, and then they completely blow the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's usually goes pretty poorly for
Miami
them. But,
is never back, is what I'm trying to say. They're never gonna be back. The U will never be back. I'm saying it right now.
That's too hot of a take. I won't take that. I will not be taking that bet. But I do think that Miami is, and I think it's because it goes without saying. It's very obvious Miami's usually overrated. But can Miami finish with a pretty decent, will Miami finish as a top 5 ACC team this year? Yes, I think they will. I'll make that take. I think Miami will finish as top. And now I know ACC's bad. I know. I know it's a terrible conference, but they will be one of the better teams in it regardless. Because I think Clemson is going to be the obvious contender. North Carolina is going to be a solid team. And I think Miami can come in after them. I think they should. They're in position to be third.
We're going to argue about this way more in 2 minutes. Let's go ahead and just run through some of these award watch lists. I'm just going to run through them as you had them. For the Nagurski Award, which is the best defensive player, we got Derek Stingley Jr. and Kayvon Thibodeau. I love both of these picks. I think both of these guys are studs. They're both probably going to be top 10 picks, if not top 5 picks in the next draft. I think you're absolutely correct here, and those are both great picks. For the Doak Walker Award, this is going to be an interesting one. I think Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller are kind of your clear favorites. But you never really know when it comes to running backs. You could really have a guy just break out of nowhere. Muhammad Ibrahim from Minnesota is a little bit more of a dark horse guy that you threw in here. And then for the Bolitnikov, you could have both wide receivers, Noah Brown and Chris Olave, on here from Ohio State. Chris Olave is the favorite. Justin Ross is returning from an injury last year.
Very dependent on that. Yeah, very dependent on how his return
is a veteran on that team. And Clemson's just loaded this year. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we had Quentin Johnston on here, and I think that's a good pick. I really do. I think he could be such a stud. He's 6'4". Yeah. When's the last time we had a really elite big receiver? You could talk about John Diarse, but I don't think John Diarse was necessarily elite as much as he had some great plays, like that catch against Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. But when's
Baylor
the last
catch.
time?
Don't forget the Baylor end zone catch. Probably the best
Baylor
one he's ever
zone
had.
Catch. Yes, you're right.
I know you don't want to remember the game, but I gotta shout out the moment. The moment was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a college football game. So, and look it up, but don't look up the whole
game. Quentin Johnston is the truth, and I am all aboard with him being on our Bolitnikov Award watch list. We didn't really talk about Coach of the Year, but I'm going to throw out Jimbo Fisher as a possible Coach of the Year, and we'll get to why. I don't want to put everything. I don't want to front load this podcast too much, but I think Jimbo Fisher could have a big year. Mac Brown is another one. 2 old Grizzly veterans of the coaching game that could end up having some really interesting seasons. And I'm going to throw Gus Malzahn in there too, just for the hell of it, because I love Gus Malzahn. But let's talk about the team in which your favorite college football team, or the conference in which your favorite college football team resides. Of course, I'm talking about the Atlantic Coast Conference, which without Clemson, I think last year might have made a case, maybe not last year, but the year before North Carolina was at least decent, had a case for the worst conference top to bottom, or at least two through the last team. Because again, Clemson kind of redeems the ACC. But Clemson, would you agree, has the easiest path by far to a playoff berth this year?
Yeah, and I don't really think that's very debatable, to be honest. I think they have it pretty much solidly.
They
in their
don't play
hands.
Miami or North Carolina during the regular season.
I mean, yeah, I get the Georgia game's a little bit of an offset, but obviously it's out of conference. But one note to have about this before we go through it, but all of these previews we're doing, we used to do it on every team, everything ever, which that got a little lengthy. So this year, what we're going to do instead is we're going to have the previews based on teams that I think could be biggest risers, and then teams that could be biggest fallers. Some of these may have 2, some may have 3, but it's never.
And
more
I'm going
to
throw in some wild cards.
True too, but the big guys, the big teams, we've either kind of already talked about or we're going to talk about more. So it seems like the Clemson team, a lot of the playoff level teams, we're going to get to those more later. So these are more about the smaller schools that, I mean, some of them aren't necessarily small, but not as giant of the schools in terms of prowess in football this season. And just talking about them a little more just to shed some light on them, because obviously all of these teams probably we're going to end up talking about over the course of the season, especially over this next week as we enter into week 1. So to go ahead, as you were saying, with the ACC, with the and this is necessarily, we're not doing this by division either. We're just saying all the teams that are in this. Biggest risers, my first one in here is I think that NC State can be on this list. I think NC State is in very good position to get second once again in the Atlantic Conference. They have a very strong linebacker unit. They are going to be a little weaker at the line, but overall this offense is very strong for the Pack. I think they have a favorable schedule. I like what I see from NC State. I think they're usually an underrated team every year, but I could see this team's in game, if they have a solid season, getting into a really good bowl and end up, I mean, this is like a 9-3. They could have a really good season here. I think that they should end up getting second in the Atlantic. They look good.
No, I totally agree. They're returning 90% of their production on defense. We know what Dave Doran can do with a veteran NC State team that's clearly being overlooked before the year. I'm on board with this totally.
Next up is Miami, and this is kind of the wild card. I know that I'm higher than you are. I'm just telling you, I'm higher than you are. I think this team is in a very similar position to Indiana, where it's just not going to be anywhere close to winning the conference, but its number one thing it depends on is quarterback health. And we know that King has been an issue back and forth. I know you're not a fan of him, but either way, I still think this could be solid on that end. So I'm just saying on that end. Now, the line does need improvement. The defense, we know, had a lot of issues last year, but they do have a lot to work with. I think that there could be a case for them here. I think that they should finish second in the Coastal. I'll be very surprised if they didn't. UNC does have this division, I would say, nearly on lock. The only team I see as a serious threat to UNC is Miami in this Coastal division. I don't really see anybody else really being much of a threat.
Look, and I get it. I get why you're high on De'Aaron King. I'm looking at the stats, and at Houston as a junior, completed 63% of his passes. Average yards per attempt is 9.5, or almost 10, 9.9. And then he finished with 36 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Last season at Miami, 64% of his passes, 2,600 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions in 11 games. Look, this is eye test for me. I have just never seen anything from this guy that tells me that he is going to be an elite quarterback or that he is going to step it up that much in the process. And now Jack's
again.
back. We lost Jack temporarily, but Jack is back.
Yes, my bad. And yeah, I agree with what you were saying on that end. I think there has been improvement by King, but there still is a lot of area of concern. So I get that on that end. Last team I think could be rising a lot. I think the most underrated team in the ACC, Boston College, a team we usually don't really talk about a lot, but I really think this is just going to be a solid team. They have a very experienced roster, a very favorable schedule. Every single one of their O-line is coming back. Great tight end play, though, has been a staple of this team, and they are losing a lot of guys in that end, so that's got to get better. But defense, again, very, very good at turnovers, which is something that we're actually going to be on that a lot over this next list of teams that are not particularly great on. But they do great on turnovers. They're not very good at points per game prevention, though, which at the end of the day, you just got to score more. So defense is a little shakier, sometimes stronger. But again, that O-line comeback, this Boston College team can have a really actually good offense. I think that there's a lot of very entertaining play in the Atlantic Division this year.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. The question is, are they going to be able to defend these high-powered offenses with quarterbacks like De'Aaron King? Little shout out, little positive note, like De'Aaron King, like Sam Howell, like DJ Uiagalelei. It's going to be really hard to defend, and they're returning 60% of their production on defense, which is on the lower end of the ACC. I think the average here is probably around. No, they're returning the fourth lowest amount of production in the ACC. So they are in the bottom 5 of returning production on defense. But we'll have to see. I am not counting the Boston College Eagles out, but I am cautiously optimistic about it. I will definitely say that. But who are some teams that we can just expect to be bad? Who can we write off this year?
One of the ones here is Louisville. And now Louisville, I think, is more of a faller in a way of that they're really unpredictable and wild cardy more than they are faller, because they obviously were not very good last year, but they lost so many games by under 7 points. And that was their problem, is they couldn't close, they couldn't finish, but they weren't really getting blown out a lot. They also had a really bad turnover ratio. They could not control the ball at all on that end. But the offense does show a lot of promise, and the defense did improve from 2019 to 2020 despite their losses. So this is a team that I more think is super unpredictable and you shouldn't bet anything on, but not as much bad, more just sort of we don't really know what to think of them because they haven't showed any consistency. And that is bad in a way.
Yeah, well, for them, they're returning 81% of their offense, which is not saying much because they weren't very good last year, and only 50% of their defense. So we're going to have to see a lot of improvement out of this team if they even want to be relatively competitive. So
and that's why I make that point.
I'm right on board with you here.
Yeah, defense improves, but you lose half of them.
And then we have Pitt, who was terrible last year, quite frankly. And now they're only returning 40% of their offensive production and 56% of their defensive production. Both are in the bottom. I mean, that's the worst returning production as far as offense goes in the ACC. And it's the second worst as far as defense goes. So it's safe to say that this is a team that needs the program to keep going, needs continuity on this team. And they're not getting it this year. They're getting a lot of turnover from a team that wasn't very good. So, yeah, I'm totally on board with Pitt being terrible this year.
Don't forget, though, out of those starters, both defensive ends and both safeties are gone. They had one
shout out
run.
Rashad Weaver on the Titans.
One run of 40-plus yards all season and 3.2 yards per carry. Remember, this was the big running back school, so not anymore. But, yeah, yards per play isn't bad for years, but it's just gotten worse.
The days of LaShawn McCoy and Larry Fitzgerald are no more.
I mean, even James Conner was a stud there. And then, I mean, obviously that's been long since
you're totally right.
Yeah, and next up, the last little bit, ACC championship game. I think this one is not particularly shocking, but here we go. Clemson, UNC, Clemson wins.
I have the exact same thing. I don't see this playing out any other way. Not even a little bit. I am counting Miami out as soon as the season kicks off because they're the Miami Hurricanes.
I don't think they're going to get past UNC. I think they may. They think they may be closer than people may think they will, but they're not going to. I don't think they're going to get better.
And now's a good time to mention that UNC had a top 10 recruiting class with multiple 5 stars. The offseason a year ago, who were freshmen last year, and now those guys are going to be sophomores. Getting more of those guys on the field is going to be huge. And they returned Sam Howell, who is a stud quarterback, and I think is better than Mitch Trubisky was at North Carolina at this point. Obviously, one more, but is definitely better than Mitch Trubisky was
better
at this
coaching,
point.
Though.
But let's go to our bread and butter, the Big 12, where I don't know that there's going to be that much competition at the top, but there's going to be a hell of a lot of competition in the middle of this year. This conference is absolutely stacked in the middle. And let's just go ahead and start off with the most obvious riser, who I actually think could fall a little bit this year, but from where their program has been in the past, certainly they're everyone's favorite sleeper pick. They're returning an incredible amount of production this year. It is the Iowa State Cyclones. What do we got here, Jack? What's your take?
Well, for me, I'm going to have to stick with being very, very solid on Iowa State. I mean, they have everyone back basically from last season. The offensive line is going to be one of the best in the Big 12. They have an unbelievably good defense, and they did allow a lot of deep plays last year, which was one of their big flaws. But it's just, I love this team. And I mean, I hate that they're there with TCU. I mean, I wish that it wasn't the same problem, but it's like, dang, I mean, this is a really good football team, and this is a team that I think is going to be in a lot of really good positions. I think that they're one of the better teams in the country. I know that it's if it wasn't for Oklahoma, I think that this Iowa State team would probably win the ACC, except for Clemson, and it probably would win the Pac-12. And so, yeah, this is a very good Iowa State team. I'm very excited to watch them this year.
No, absolutely. With Breece Hall returning, the X factor is obviously going to be Brock Purdy, because Brock Purdy was not good for the first part of last year, and they still managed to skate by. I don't think they're going to be able to skate by like that playing Iowa early within the first 3 weeks of the season. I don't remember if that's week 2 or 3, but playing Iowa, another top 25 team this early in the season, they're not going to be able to skate by with Brock Purdy being bad. Like he was at the beginning of last year. Now they brought him along and he's going to be good, but they actually, and here's my problem with Iowa State this year is I think they're going to be as good as they were last year, but I think the rest of the conference sort of in that middle ground is going to take a little bit of a step forward. And do you know who the only team returning more of their production on both sides of the ball is in the Big 12?
And who is that?
It would be the Sooners of Oklahoma. So there's the buzzsaw that you're going to run into if you're the Cyclones. But let's talk about some other great teams, or teams who we think could be great, have the potential to be great in the Big 12. This is a homer pick, but I'm right here with you. TCU returning.
They're going to rise. Yep.
Duggan's back. I don't think Gary Patterson will stand for mediocrity much longer. And I mean, if TCU's mediocre again, we need to have a serious conversation about, is Gary Patterson's time here about done? Obviously, I don't think TCU should fire Gary Patterson. I'm still very much a believer in the Patterson way. Without Sonny Cumbie's touch anywhere near this team, I think TCU could be good again. And I think they certainly get one of Iowa State or Oklahoma. And I mean, I'm going to knock on wood very hard right now, but I think we beat Texas this year pretty easily.
I would say I'm pretty confident in that too. Again, knock on wood. But I would agree with that take. I think that's something that I would be fairly confident in. But again, we talked about Johnson. We know the O-line needs a little bit of improvement, being able to guard him. Losing Wallow, Merrick, and Washington, all of those guys, big guys on defense that are all looking at NFL stuff. Yeah, that's not going to be helpful. But we also understand that TCU has tended to be, we hope again, but tended to be a defensive juggernaut team and one of the best of the Big 12 on that side of the ball.
But even so, they're returning 88% of their total production on defense and 84% of their total production on offense. This team has plenty of continuity despite losing those guys in the draft. And man, I mean, the cornerbacks for this team are going to be legit. I think we have the DBs this year to be able to run with Oklahoma and Texas. And I'm a believer in Max Duggan. I think this is the year he takes that big step forward that we've all been waiting for. And once Sonny Cumbie got out of the building, I mean, this team, or once Sonny Cumbie got relieved of his duties, I should say, this team really took off under the guidance of Doug Meacham. And let's not forget, we haven't even mentioned any of the running backs. That's
true.
Darwin Barlow.
My guy Evans.
Back. Zach Evans. Who this is just a funny side note. Zach Evans is suspended for the first 2 series of the first game for violating team rules. So Zach Evans will not see action in the first 2 offensive series against Duquesne. I wonder how the TCU offense will ever recover from that. But across the state, we've got a team who everyone hates. Everyone. This team.
Everyone. Especially after the summer. Especially after the summer.
Yeah. But
yeah.
You have them as a riser. And I just don't agree, Jack. I just don't agree. I think first-year head coach, a lot of turnover, and I mean, yeah, they're more talented than everyone else in the Big 12, but did that work with Charlie Strong? Did that work with Tom Herman? Not really.
I'm gonna be totally honest with you.
I think they're gonna get. Let me finish my thought. I think they're gonna get everyone's best shot this year. They are going to get every single team's best shot because everyone hates them. They're going to get horns down in every single stadium that they go to, more often than not. And I am just not a believer. I'm out on Texas this year, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they come in. Sark is a genius play caller, and Texas comes in with a huge chip on their shoulder, and they really show out. I am, as a TCU homer, as a Big 12 homer, I'm out on Texas this year. I think this is going to be another failure of a season in Austin.
I'm a little conflicted on this because for me, in all honesty, which is a little bit of a goofy moment on my end, but I had forgotten that Texas went to the Big 12 championship and was very close to all that this season. So to be totally frank with you, I actually kind of misplaced this team because I actually wrote in it. If you see the script I wrote right here, I was saying without Ellinger and Cosme in the line, that's going to be tough, which is worded poorly because, of course, Ellinger, quarterback, Cosme, one of the top linemen who went in the draft. It's going to be tough. Bijan Robinson is a monster, though. I think he'll be one of the best running backs in the Big 12. Of course, that usually can't save your team, but I do think he'll be a huge, huge reason why this team will win some solid games. But it is tough, and I think that there are teams that are vying for that spot, and both TCU and Iowa State are in better positions to make bigger moves. So, yeah, I am going to change my take on that a little bit and understand that a little bit of that may be slightly misguided on that end. So, I'll rescind that take. To be totally honest with you, I forgot that I made that end of it. But there are some teams, though, that do deserve the biggest fallers. And the first one on here is Oklahoma State. Because Oklahoma State was a team that we thought, at least I thought, was going to be some big-time team last year. And yes, 8-3 is nothing to shy at. 8-3 is an objectively very solid record. But this team should have been better. And I was waiting forever for Sanders to finally step it up at quarterback.
Spencer
you had Wallace
Sanders
on the outside,
sucked.
Spencer Sanders at quarterback. You had Chubba Hubbard at running back. You had such a trifecta to do anything. And
you
they
got
did
the mullet man.
Nothing.
Calling the plays.
Nothing. And it made me so
Nothing.
sad. And not sad. I mean, I have nothing really for or against Oklahoma State, much less obviously than Texas or OU. But it was just like, you're just going to waste it. And they wasted it. And now Sanders is still not really doing anything. They had a horrible turnover ratio. Rush defense was more of a concern. Rush defense was 6th in the Big 12. And Oklahoma State usually has a solid defense. So it's that, again, rush defense was very poor. And especially against a lot of these really good Big 12 running backs we're talking about with Iowa State, Texas. OU always has good ones. TCU. I mean, there are a lot of really good running backs. I mean, that's not even mentioning Iowa State with Brees. So there are a lot of really good running backs in this league. And will Oklahoma State stop any of them? No, they will not. If they perform like last season, they won't.
You know how much I love the deep analytics, the deep dives, the statistical deep dives. Well, here's a great deep analytics stat for you. Spencer Sanders sucks. And he was terrible last year. With all this talent around him, he was terrible. And I am so out on Spencer Sanders. It's unbelievable. I would not be surprised if he got benched halfway through the year. But is he coming back?
It was bad.
Is he coming back? Do I have that wrong?
I am going to check on that.
Because they shouldn't have him back if so. I think he's still there. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure.
I'm double checking.
Let's move on.
Just to check right now. He's a redshirt junior.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he was offensive freshman of the year in 2019. Like, honorable mention all Big 12. He was honorable mention all Big 12 last year.
the defensive pinnacle, the defensive cornerstone that are all the teams in the Big 12 except for TCU. There is no defense in this conference. That's just the fact of the matter. But let's move on. You've got Kansas State on here, and I'm going to push back a little bit. Skylar Thompson was hurt last year, and we've seen what they can do with Skylar Thompson. Now, is this team going to be good? No. But I certainly think they are still a threat to upset one of the teams at the top of the conference. If you're a TCU and you're undefeated going into that Kansas State game, you got to be afraid of this team because they've got weapons.
And I'm just not crazy high on them. And I know that Deuce Vaughn is going to be a very, very good running back for this team, which is a guy that I don't think is being talked about a lot. I was saying Big 12 got a lot of good running backs. He's one of them, but there's just not a ton of options at wide receiver. The defense was not good. And yes, there were a lot of injuries and COVID with this team. They were hit very hard by that. I will not try to sugarcoat that at all. I know that was a big issue with this team that does have to get a lot of, grain of salt on it. So I understand that's a piece of it. I'm not trying to put that away at all. But there is part of me, though, that will still sit here and wonder of sort of like what's kind of next on that end. And I don't know. There's just not that I really, really love about this Kansas State team that can really make some kind of huge impact. And I think it's, again, I see teams like TCU, Iowa State, Oklahoma, all those being much better, and even a few others. And will they improve at all? Probably some, but it's just, I don't know. I'm not crazy high on Kansas State this year. But to move on to the Big 12. Oh, sorry. Do you have another point?
No. I was just gonna say, I think of them more as an upset alert team than a real contender. I personally am just a believer in Chris Kleiman. I think the job that he did with that team last year, despite all the adversity that they went through, was pretty impressive. But we'll have to see because they are not returning very much on defense. But Big 12 championship game where you were about to take us, who you got?
I think Oklahoma is pretty much an auto-picked every year. They've won 6 straight Big 12 championships, which is kind of crazy to think out loud of 6 straight. Is like they're basically just Kansas basketball for Big 12 version.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, it's like that, which is still stunning to think about how many Kansas won in a row before they finally started falling off some. But anyway, Oklahoma will still be in this game. Besides, I mean, the planets aligning, they're going to be in this game. And I think Iowa State's going to face them here. I think Iowa State's the second best team in the Big 12. I think they've proven that in multiple years. I know that Texas got in, but I think clearly Texas will not be as much a contention in here. I'm a big believer in the Iowa State team. I think they're going to get there, and I think they're going to make it really close. But I really love this OU team. And I don't mean that as in loving OU. I don't love OU at all. But I do think they're in a really good position to make some serious, serious noise. And so I think because of that, I just really like what they can do.
And I'm picking Oklahoma to win as well, but I think they're going to beat TCU in the Big 12 championship game. Now, I realize this is a homer pick, but it reminds me of every great TCU team that we've had. We've got a quarterback returning after years who has improved every single season. We've got stud running backs that can break a big one off at any moment. We've got a lot of returning talent on defense, especially in the defensive backs, where Travion Hodges Tomlinson is going to go absolutely off this season. I'm convinced. And the D-line is returning several productive players, as well as you've got Quentin Johnston returning on offense. And we're getting rid of some of those smaller, shiftier receivers that Sonny Cumbie just loved to run on jet sweeps 18 times a game, even though it never worked. I think getting rid of Sonny Cumbie, I think the combination of all the returning production, I think it's lining up great for TCU this year. And I'm going to go ahead and pick them to make the game. But obviously,
I'd love to see it
against a buzzsaw in the Oklahoma Sooners. Now let's go to a conference that is absolutely not our bread and butter. I feel like we have no feel whatsoever for this conference because we're just so far removed from the Big Ten. I mean, I don't know.
But I got a lot of research here, though.
I don't know anyone who went to school in the Big Ten. It's kind of hard to watch the Big Ten in this part of the country with SEC and Big 12 sort of taking over. But the Big Ten was probably the second best conference last year, top to bottom. Granted, they only played 5 or 6 games each, but probably the second best conference, top to bottom. Who you got in the Big 12 this year?
Or Big 10. Big 10 this year, I think there are a lot of really fun. Yeah. Big 10, I think there are a lot of really fun teams to watch. I'm really excited about what we could have in here. And to start out, biggest risers, Penn State. I believe in Penn State this year. I think they're going to be a very solid team. Their turnover ratio was really tough. 4 big defensive linemen got tough too. They got really 2 solid transfers in. But there is a ton of talent on this team, and I think they can be really good. Indiana, Penix, of course, you remember his terrible injury last year, but if he does come back, IU will be a serious threat in the Big Ten. Yes. Defense brings back 9 starters, led the conference in takeaways last year. This Indiana team is a dangerous one. And last up, Iowa, which I think is pretty much the biggest contender to beat out Wisconsin for that Big Ten West spot this season. We know Wisconsin's always in the mix of it, but Iowa's going to be good. They finished 6-0 after an 0-2 start. They have an opener against Indiana and then at Indiana State, against Iowa State back-to-back. Oh, man, those are going to be fun. I'm telling you, Iowa State this year may be one of the best Iowa State games ever. Not even exaggerating. This may be one of the best between those two teams. Running back Tyler Goodson is excellent. Great O-line. Now, quarterback is kind of the problem here. They also have a great defensive secondary linebacker core, but the line needs some work. So kind of weird problems. I feel like we usually don't see teams with a great outside defense, but then that line is not good. And then same thing with quarterback. With the quarterback kind of has a problem, but like everything else is kind of fine. So,
well, I think it's just a classic. I think you're just going to see a classic 8-win Iowa team. 8-4. Solid as a rock. They might even beat Ohio State. Who knows? But I think this is a classic, just upper middle of the road Iowa team. I like your Penn State pick there as well. I mean, I don't see how they can stay down for long. Are they going to beat Ohio State? Probably not. But I'm actually trying to make it up to Happy Valley for a game this year. So we'll see if that happens.
I also am. I may be going to the Michigan game. I'm looking into that, but
I might be there as well.
I did want to mention though,
me or a shell of me in the tailgate lot.
That's true. I did want to mention though, which we're going to get to this game in the coming weeks when we get to previews and recaps. But I do think, and I know this is kind of a crazy take, but I think that the Ball State-Penn State game may be more of a trap game than you think it may be.
I mean, yeah, Ball State was in the what conference are they in again?
MAC.
They're in the MAC. Yeah, they're in the MAC. They were in the MAC championship last year, right? Against Buffalo.
I'm just saying. Ball State's not a team to play around. We're going to get to them later, though. Next up, biggest fallers, Michigan, which I put here almost as a joke because aren't they always falling? Michigan continues their campaign of agony with Indiana and Penn State improving. Ohio State still dominant. What is Michigan going to do? Backfield strong. Defense was horrific last year. They could be easily 4th in the division, and I don't even think that's too crazy to take.
And their defense is probably going to get worse just based off returning production. I'm so not a believer in Michigan. I don't even think they're worth talking about. Hey, you can hear Michigan content everywhere else. Everybody loves to talk about them, even though they never do anything. Kind of like Nebraska, who should also be on this followers list, but I don't know how much further you can fall if you're Scott Frost than the press conference where he just said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate. It's sort of hard to watch a bit. Next couple ones, Minnesota boat might be sinking a little. 11-2 and 19, 3-4 last year. But Ibrahim should help a little bit. But oh man, the defense. 8 sacks in 7 games. That's not good. You can't win a lot when you're having 8 sacks total in 7 games.
Yeah, I mean, I still stand by my statement that PJ Fleck is who everyone thinks Tom Herman is. But we saw how that ended up at Texas in a major Power 5 conference. So it could be interesting for Minnesota. They returned 70% of their offense, 70% of their defense, but I am not really convinced that they can really compete yet, or that they have the talent to compete yet in the Big Ten. And let's go ahead. I'm going to skip on to your final follower here, Northwestern, who lost almost all of their offense. They lost several NFL prospects, and I think this team could be terrible this year.
No, they're going to fall. I mean,
like God awful.
I will shout this out now because I'm probably never going to say it again on the podcast, but shout out to Northwestern for winning the last two of the last 3 Big Ten West titles, because this is probably the last time I can ever say that. But
and almost
seriously, congrats though. That's impressive.
And they almost beat Ohio State. They almost had the greatest karma victory ever after the Big Ten completely changed their rules to let Ohio State play in the Big Ten championship.
We're not even going to get.
We're just not going to get. I mean, Ohio State, which brings us to the championship game, where Ohio State will make the championship game because the Big Ten won't allow them to not make the championship game, as we saw last year. Who are they going to play in the championship game? That is the question. I've got Wisconsin purely because I just don't know with the Big Ten. I mean, it's going to be so many average teams, and the Big Ten West kind of continually sucks year after year. It's a very lopsided conference with one good division and one pretty average division. And I liked what I saw out of Graham Mertz last year before he eventually kind of fell off. But I think Paul Chryst has a good thing going on up there. And I think that Wisconsin's probably the best bet to make it out of the West. So I'm going to go with them.
And I'm going to go with Wisconsin too. And there are a couple reasons why. First reason is their top 3 hardest games of the year, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Iowa. All 3 are at home. Second reason I'm big on Wisconsin here is because their last 4 games of the season are at Rutgers, Northwestern, Nebraska, and at Minnesota, which that's not that hard. So you have an easy into the stretch, big teams there. Last reason is I still think they're on paper the strongest. So I think with all 3 of that there, Wisconsin should be expected to get through. Next up, we got the Pac-12. Pac-12, the last of the Power 5. I almost went a little bit Power 6 on here. Just kidding. I forgot about the SEC. So the second to last one on the Power 5. And Power 5 is becoming a very loose term, both when it comes to the entire shakeup of everything we know about college football over the summer, but also with the Pac-12 seeming to decrease in quality. But I'll make the take this year that I think there's some pretty quality teams in here that people should know about. And the first team here on Biggest Risers, which I think this could arguably be one of the biggest risers in all of Power 5, and that's Arizona State. I'm very excited to see what the Sun Devils do this year. Their crossover game with Washington will likely decide a lot for this team, but they're returning a ton of talent from the team last year that led the Pac-12 in scoring. Quarterback play was great. Now, red zone offense wasn't really very good, nor run defense, but a very solid defense overall. I think Arizona State is going to be a huge contender in a Pac-12 South that's going to be really good. Utah is a very good team. USC is a very good team. Arizona State is going to be a huge dark horse team. I am genuinely excited to watch Pac-12 South football, and I have not said that in a while, but I think there is a lot of real talent there. And the North, I mean, we know has Oregon, Washington, a bunch of teams like that, but I'm just saying, I think the Pac-12 could actually be pretty entertaining this year.
No, I agree. I mean, I always think the Pac-12 is entertaining, and maybe it's entertaining because
Competitive,
teams are good, and maybe it's entertaining because teams are bad. But entertaining is certainly a good way to describe the Pac-12. If pure entertainment is what you're going for, you had Washington on this list. I'm not super convinced that this coaching staff is going to have what it takes to bring Washington back to where they were under Chris Peterson. I don't know. I'm not a super believer in the Huskies, but with a small sample size last year and not really getting to see them on much of a big stage, the jury's still out. I don't know.
Yeah, I like them only because they lost the conference title game purely due to a Mickey Mouse COVID rule. And they did. They were better than Oregon that year. They earned the conference title spot. They lost it because of COVID. Oregon got to play, and then we know Oregon won. So I'm only giving the benefit of the doubt there. And again, everything goes down to the game against Arizona State. That's the big game here. I think that's going to decide a lot. I'm really on that edge of it. I don't know. I feel like that game is going to end up deciding a lot of stuff with this team, and I think that it's going to be a pretty big deal for them on that, and I think that's going to matter. And then last up for Cal. Or go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and as much shit as we've talked about Michigan for, in the last 20 minutes, they do have to play Michigan on 9/11 at Ann Arbor. That is going to be a very, very tough game, regardless of if Michigan is good or not. But we're really going to get to see how they stack up early in the season. That's a pretty big game.
No, it is. That's going to be interesting to watch. I'm very excited to watch that. Next up is Cal. They were last in the Pac-12 in yards per play for 4 years, and they're thin at D-line, but the defense is going to be a lot better than last year, and I'm only putting them here as a literal statement. They went 1-3 last year. They're going to be a lot better than 1-3. They won't be good, but they're going to be better than 1-3. So I only put I'm only putting them on here as a mostly kind of pity point, but I do think that they're going to be a very, very solid point at this time. So I'm only being that end.
Can I throw one in there for you? UCLA.
That's true too.
Could be an interesting team this year, seeing as they returned 86% of their production on offense, 77% of their production on defense. I mean, can Chip Kelly do it? That seems to be the question. They were competing with USC last year. They were very competitive last year. And aside from a date with LSU, which is at home in the Rose Bowl, but that's not going to be a home game. That stadium's going to turn purple.
That's true.
They get Fresno State at home. They get Arizona State at home. They get Oregon at home. They get Colorado at home. USC right down the road in the Coliseum. And they get Cal at home. Now, they got to go to Utah to play on the road. But, I mean, I think their toughest games are going to be at Washington and at USC. And if they can take care of business in both of those games, they've got a decent shot with most of their big games being at home.
Looking at biggest fallers for this end, it's kind of odd because I think that Stanford has been a team that's been frustrating to no end. They've won at least 8 games a season from 2011 to 2018. They went 4-8 in 2019 and then 4-2 last year, which is, of course, better. But they have to play Notre Dame again. Defense has regressed a little bit. It's just I'm not super duper high on what Stanford's been doing. I think they're going to slip a little bit here. We've seen the Pac-12 North is still going to be very solid, and I just don't think they're going to be better than them. So that's sort of my pick on that, and I think that's going to be a little weaker.
I'm with you there.
Next up, and then lastly here is Colorado. They finished right behind USC last year, but Arizona State's going to be better. USC's not slowing down. They averaged 31.5 opponents' points per game average, and they only scored 28.5 points a game. There's a lot of reason for concern for Colorado to slip here. And I don't think they're going to be bad, but I just like Arizona State a lot more. I like Utah a lot more. I like USC a lot more.
Well, the teams you just mentioned, I mean, they're the lowest on this list as far as returning production. Cal actually is one of the lower, in fact, the lowest one on defense. But if
They
we're
still
gonna get
1-3. I'm just saying they're going to be better than 1-3 for Cal.
if we're gonna get to this point, the Pac-12 championship game, we've actually got the same matchup, different winners. I've got Oregon beating USC because I like the Oregon coaching staff, what Mario Cristobal is doing in Eugene, far more than I like what Clay Helton is doing in Los Angeles. So, what say you? And I've got something actually to your point. I want to see if you bring it up. But what say you about the USC Trojans this year? Because why would they not choke last year? Or why would they choke last year but not choke this year?
See, my reasoning here is I just think they're the best team overall in the South. Now, see, my problem too, which I'm going to put this out here. This is by far the least confident pick that I have out of any of the Power 5 conference championships because I would have no surprise at all if Utah was here. I would have no surprise at all if Arizona State was here. I would have no surprise at all. Okay, maybe a little bit surprised if it was someone else, even than Oregon. I think Oregon's still the favorite, but I wouldn't be shocked if a team like Washington came up. It's just there's so many options, which again, it's why the Pac-12 is a little bit of fun because you don't really just know. And a lot of teams you just kind of know. And so that's at least the big part that I really enjoy about the Pac-12 is it's hard. And yes, USC tends to be pretty consistent in terms of getting back to the Pac-12 championship game. They do that pretty much every year, which is why I think you and I agree pretty clearly on who is going to be in this game. But I think that USC has the talent to come back and win it again. Now, yes, should they have won it last year? Absolutely. Yes, they were the team favorite for it, and Oregon got their way in by a Mickey Mouse way. I just don't think they're going to do it again.
But I don't think this is the USC program. This is the Clay Helton experience. You might win every game. None of it will look impressive. You will almost choke every single game away, no matter if it's against a good team or a bad team. So I think this is the USC experience at this point. They're going to win their games in a very unsatisfying fashion, and then they're eventually going to choke in the big one.
And to throw one back, Corey Foreman, the guy I mentioned earlier, that D end, he's going to win Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. That's my take there. I think he's going to get some big things going on that end. I think Drake Jackson's a big guy on this team, USC defender. Junior Drake London has been an excellent wide receiver for this team. He'll get up.
Troy Polamalu's cousin, who I can't pronounce. I think it's Tuivasa. Is that it?
Biggest thing, yes. The biggest thing I love about this team, again, I think there's a lot of really solid quality talent coming in here. I think this defense is going to be really, really good. There's a lot of stuff to like here too.
And they've got a lot of playmakers. But it's about coaching. At the end of the day, in college football, a lot of it is just about coaching. That's why we see these teams shelling out big money for guys like Jimbo Fisher, because they have won a national championship. Clay Helton has not shown me anything at USC to say, he should still be the coach there. I think he should have gotten fired years ago. But the only reason is because he wins games, even though it's very, very unsatisfying to watch and in fact, hard at times to watch. But let's go to what I would call my second bread and butter. I grew up in this. You grew up in this.
I did. Yeah, I did. I went to 5 schools. Yep.
This is the Southeastern Conference. The big brother, if you will, and
most
getting bigger
conference.
Getting bigger as of 2025. I wouldn't even label it the most annoying conference. I think the Big Ten might be the most annoying conference.
Big Ten, I wouldn't say that. SEC talks more than anybody else.
Michigan's going to be good again this year.
No one says that
Michigan
anymore.
sucks.
Nobody says that. No. Michigan's the most. Michigan is clowned on more than any other team than maybe Texas. And Texas because they did it to themselves. No, Michigan gets much hate and so much clowning, which they deserve.
Themselves in the foot every other day.
Yes, but don't act like Michigan. I wrote Michigan instead of Michigan in this, and I bet most people wouldn't even know the difference. I think
you're confusing Twitter with sports media because Michigan has been. People saying, "Oh, they've got the talent this year. They got Joe Milton this year. They got this guy this year. This guy this year." Every year there's like, oh, this is going to be the year that it finally clicks for Jim Harbaugh And they've been terrible ever since that terrible call on 4th down for JT Barrett, where JT Barrett was in fact short. And that is an absolute fact. But the Big Ten is rigged. And that's all we're going to say about that.
Well, we know that. We know the Big 12's rigged. That's been a very cut and dry thing we've seen for quite a while. I'm interested.
We're gonna really speed through after this. We're gonna really speed through some of the smaller mid-major conferences because we are running over time at this point, and I haven't eaten dinner. So, who do you got for biggest risers in the SEC? And I'm definitely gonna have some agreement or some pushback on a lot of these.
For me on this end, this is going to be tough for a lot of these teams, but some of them I think may go a little easier than others, a couple of them. First one up here, as much as it makes me just sick to say, it's got to be Georgia. And I know it's got to be Georgia first because by default, Florida's going to be, we'll talk about later in fallers. And this is simply because Florida lost too much. Georgia didn't. Georgia gets JT Daniels back. Florida does not get Kyle Trask back. That tends to change your teams pretty big. JT Daniels, pretty much anytime he was on there, was really big. Anytime he wasn't, he wasn't. Now, there has been some O-line shuffling. There have been some losses at wide receiver. Cornerback is also a weak spot, but the defense is still very, very good. Unless, again, like with OU, maybe not as much, but unless something just absurd happens, Georgia will be back in Atlanta this December. I will be absolutely blown away if they aren't back, which is possible. Again, it's possible. We never know. There could be something stupid, but it's just, it's really hard for me to imagine.
Georgia is turning into, and I'm not trying to liken their program. Don't hear me saying that. They do not have the championship pedigree that these other programs have. But on a recruiting and just on a blue chip ratio level, they are the same sort of 5-star factory that we see in Columbus, Ohio, in Clemson, South Carolina, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They are a machine in just turning out talent. Now, the question for Georgia, as always, is this offense finally going to be a 21st century offense, or are we still going to be stuck in the early 90s, just running the ball and playing defense? And that's really going to be the question as far as how good can this team be? Because we saw an uptick in offense once JT Daniels took the field last year. But the question is, if they're just going to run the ball and not really let him air it out that much, I mean, who knows? But to be fair, the last quarterback that we saw have success at Georgia was Jake Fromm, who I don't think any of us thought was really that good. I mean, Justin Fields should have started over him as a freshman, for crying out loud.
Which will never get funny. It never get
It will never not be funny that Jake Fromm started for a whole year over Justin Fields.
They just gave him away.
My God. Oh, sure. I'll go to Ohio State and, go to national championship games while Georgia's sitting on the sidelines playing.
What a joke.
Freaking Cincinnati.
And barely winning, only because Cincinnati just forgot how to use the clock.
I just love the whole state of Georgia football.
Anyway, we don't need to even
really
get
puzzling.
Into that. That's painful for me after Georgia. But next up, we have Missouri. I've been impressed with what Missouri's been able to do to build their team up to be a bottom dweller SEC East team, which is bad, which people refuse to admit that the middle and bottom of the SEC is terrible. And then now moving up to be an actually pretty decent team. Very average last year against skill players, aren't saying. I am sure about that. Missouri, you're telling me Tennessee, being a middle SEC East team, could beat a lot of teams in the country? No, they can't.
Are you telling me that Missouri is going to be good this year? Because I'm going to tell you the opposite.
They'll be better. They were 5-5 in a year 0 last year. 5-5. They're going to trend up. At least a little. This team is going to trend up.
They're losing a lot of their production on offense. That's my only hang up there. I think in
year 0,
I'm a
That's pretty
fan
good
of
for a year zero.
Drinkwitz. I am a Drinkwitz fan. I am along for the ride with you there. I am just, again, cautiously optimistic about this team.
Again, I'm not saying this team's going to finish first. I'm not saying they're going to finish second. But should they be the third place team in the East? I think they should.
Oh, the East is a trash pile this year. That's an absolute
that's why I'm saying
trash
that.
heap.
I know.
It's going to be so
speaking of a
bad.
team that's not in a trash heap of a division, Texas A&M. They're one spot away from the playoffs last season. Arguably should have been in. And the Aggies are set to make another solid run here. Very good backfield, very good defense. Consistent quarterback play has been an issue for them, which we saw plenty over the last few years. But this is still a team primed to make some serious moves. Now, I still don't trust them 100%, but I do like this team a lot. I think they're going to be a huge threat, and I think this will be the closest that A&M will get to really making serious damage since the Manziel days.
Oh, and I'm all aboard the A&M train this year. Number one reason, they return Isaiah Spiller, they return DeMarvin Leal, bunch of guys on defense, and no Kellen Mond. Everyone loves Kellen Mond except for me. I am the world's only Kevin Mond hater because every time I watched Kellen Mond play, it was infuriating at how much better I think the team could be when Kellen Mond decided to jet off to the NFL and be terrible for the Vikings. So I am all aboard the, as Bill Simmons calls, the Patrick Ewing theory, where your team is actually better and more likely to win a championship without you, even though you're a good player. I'm all aboard the Kellen Mond Ewing theory. I think he limited that offense. Even though he was a good decision maker, I just think his talent did not quite have the upside that you're going to get this year from this Texas A&M offense. I'm all aboard the A&M hype train. Again, I am picking Jimbo Fisher as my coach of the year. I really am a believer in Texas A&M this year. And with Bryce Young starting at Bama, could we see a new SEC West champion?
I still don't think so, because I know you were really heavy on Auburn last year and that ended up not working out. Now, to be fair, I'll give you this. Auburn is, as you mentioned earlier, the ultimate hot-cold team. So if they're cold, they're not getting close. If they're hot, they might as well win the national title. So I get that's very back and forth. But I still trust in Alabama. I still think they're going to be the best team here. I still think they're going to be good. It's you can't ever go wrong with picking them. And I do think Georgia will be back in the East, which I think that's a pretty easy given, almost more than Alabama. I think that's easy given.
And this is going to be a down year for the SEC. I think we are both in agreement on that. This is going to be a down year for the SEC. And to go along with that, I think Florida is going to be the number one culprit of that, because this team is just returning nobody. Florida, they lost pretty much their entire offense. No. I don't think Emory Jones is going to be a good quarterback for them.
They had one shot. They had their shot.
It's not happening this year. It's not happening. You had your shot, and Marco Wilson threw a shoe. So there's that. Anything else?
And then
any other notes on Florida?
Not much, but we'll go on to the last team here in the SEC. We kind of accidentally already went over the SEC championship game, so this will be the end of the SEC. But I'm going to go with Auburn here. They have a very tough schedule. They have road trips to Penn State and LSU and A&M, and they host UGA and Bama. That's 5 games that are pretty solid losing games. Like it's
with a new coach. With a brand new coach.
That's hard.
And with Bo Nix playing quarterback.
That's
Bo
really
Nix is
hard.
not good.
I really
What did you see from Bo Nix last year that made you think, oh, with a new coach this year, he's going to be way better?
Nothing. I mean, that's why this is a tough thing. It's a tough thing to see.
He should be playing at Boise State. They should have traded Bo Nix for Brian Harsin. Should have said, hey, we'll give you our former 5-star quarterback if you just give us your head coach.
It's just painful. But no, Auburn's not going to be any kind of threat at all this year. It's going to be Alabama, Texas A&M, for fighting for the top spot. No longer Auburn, at least this season. And, LSU may make a little bit of noise, but they're not going to be better than either of those two teams. And next up, we then have the American Conference. And I put them in here to talk about a little more.
We didn't do the championship game. This was my
I thought we already did.
No, we didn't.
I thought we took. Oh, no, I made my pick. My bad. I made my pick. I didn't realize you didn't.
Come on, man.
My bad. Go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
Texas A&M is going to win the West this year. I said this about Auburn last year, and I was so dead wrong. Texas A&M is going to win the West this year. Why? Because Alabama has the lowest returning production. We talked about all the talent and production that Florida lost on offense. Now, Alabama, yes, they have top 10 recruits coming in year after year to replace these guys. That doesn't mean that they're going to be good right away. That doesn't mean that Bryce Young, in his first ever year starting as a college quarterback, is going to be immune to little slip-ups. And I think this is the year that this is just one of those years that we see every few years where Alabama has a little bit of a down season, and then they're going to come back next year. They're going to be ranked number 1 again, and they're going to beat the hell out of everyone. But
I mean, and look at schedules. Look at schedules too. Alabama has the neutral game against Miami, which they'll win. Mercer at home, which they'll win. Florida on the road, which would have been a problem last year, but they'll win. So then Southern Miss, Mississippi, at A&M will be the game of the year. And then at Mississippi State, Tennessee, LSU, New Mexico State, because of course they play New Mexico State. Oh yeah, New Mexico State and Mercer. So good job, Bama, with the hard opponents. And then in year one, hard out of conference is Miami, and then Arkansas and at Auburn.
Just wait. I've got a surprise for you later, based on this point. I've got a surprise for you later. I think Georgia wins the SEC this year. I'm a believer in JT Daniels. I think they finally bring this offense into the 21st century. And I've got Georgia winning the SEC this year, much to your chagrin, as I can clearly see on your face.
I mean, if they deserve to win, they deserve to win. I'm not as much as I'll give them that. I mean, I'm not.
I don't think this is going to be a 3-loss Bama team. I think this is a 1 or 2-loss Bama team at most.
Oh, playoffs! Don't even. Oh God, I don't even want to get started about.
But their win total:
1-loss Bama, the 1-loss A&M, the
Alabama's win total. And you're in for such a shock later. Alabama's win total is set at 11.5. I'm not taking the over.
Yeah, that's too risky. I wouldn't take that either.
So let's move on to the American Athletic Conference, where honestly, I don't know. This team is Cincinnati and then a bunch of teams that's just a crapshoot. One of them is going to end up in the championship game every year. It's going to be Memphis. It's going to be Houston. It's going to be UCF. It's going to be one of those 3 teams that plays against Cincinnati. But Cincinnati is clearly far and away the best team in this conference.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy take there. Cincinnati would have they're easily the conference champion already, if not for a pretty big disaster. But I did want to bring up, at least to mention on here, some teams to look out for. Houston. I think Houston could be a great team this year. And the reason why, because they have Dana Holgorsen in at hire from West Virginia. The Cougs don't have to play UCF or Cincy. They miss both. So think about that. Both easily the top 2 talented teams in the conference on paper, neither of which they have to deal with.
Now that I can get on board with.
That's what I'm saying. Offense is great, minus a bad turnover ratio, but they have been very solid. Defense was non-existent in getting turnovers, but was solid against the run of the pass. So I'm just saying Houston could be a team that I think is a great sleeper team to look at in the American. Other team here is Tulane. They had their 3rd straight bowl game last year and a great O-line and overall defense. They did have very poor 3rd down performance and a leaky defense overall, but I do think Tulane is going to get some wins that may be more surprising than others, which are usually a non-existent team. So I'll give them a little credit. The biggest fallers, Tulsa. Yeah, the biggest fallers, Tulsa. They had a great O-line and some guys returning from injury, but basically no big plays, 18 lost turnovers, but you lost David Collins. You lost your top 2 corners. This defense is going to be non-existent.
Yeah,
and then finally
out the door. Bad news for Tulsa.
Very true. Navy then coming up last, the team that makes absolutely no sense. This team went 3-10, 11-2, and then 3-7 last year. I don't get it either. But this team makes very weird sense. They have to play Notre Dame on the road. They do have to host Marshall Air Force. There's going to be some tough scheduling here. They also have to travel to Houston. This Navy team has too tough a schedule, and I think they'll be non-existent here. So because of that, I think Houston's going to make the AAC championship game, and they're going to play against Cincinnati. And I still think Cincy's going to win, but I think Houston may end up winning that West.
I got Memphis playing Cincinnati just because I just picked a team. It's a crapshoot, like I said. But I got Cincinnati winning. I mean, they're clearly going to be the best team in the American Athletic Conference with all the returning production on offense and some studs still on defense. A defense which was locked down last year, by the way. So let's go through the Independents. We've got Notre Dame. They, as always, and of course not last year, they played an ACC schedule last year, but as always have a lot of tough games this year. They go to Wisconsin. They play Cincinnati, USC, UNC. These are all going to be phenomenal games, must-watch TV on NBC. I assume game day will probably be at one or two of those. It's going to be a big year for Notre Dame. However, I'm not super high on this team this year. What say you?
I don't know. I think Notre Dame's a very bizarre team. Again, they have to play at Wisconsin, Cincinnati, USC, UNC. Those 4 games are going to obviously determine their schedule. I think all 4 of those games can be very fun. I'm very excited to look forward to watching those. But yeah, at Wisconsin, you're playing one of the best teams in the Big Ten. Cincinnati, you're playing probably the best G5 team. USC, a very, very good Pac-12 team. And then UNC, once again, a very, very good ACC team. So I think they could lose as much as 3 or 4 of those potentially. I mean, there's no way they're going to sweep that. So it's going to be a difficult time. And I'm not entirely sure what they're going to end up doing on that end, but it'll be tough. Next up, BYU on that end. They're losing Wilson. You have to host Arizona State and Utah, and you travel to USC. That's a really tough schedule. You have to basically play all 3 of the top 3 contenders in the Pac-12 South. That's going to be really hard for BYU, and I think they're going to fall off a bit. So not a huge year for the Independents, at least in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be too much. Next up, we'll kind of run through these.
Well.
Yeah. Next up, I'm just going to run through the rest of the conferences, some teams that this is more what we're doing here is no more big thread. I'm more just saying here are some teams I think you should watch because I think there are a lot of really fun teams in the G5, and here are a few that I think should be worth your time. In the Mountain West, 2 big teams here. Boise State season opener is tomorrow night at UCF. Watch this game. I'm so excited for this. I think it's going to be a huge reason determining the bowl game for either of these teams down the stretch. This is going to be awesome. They also host Oklahoma State 2 weeks later, Oklahoma State, Boise State. This will be a scary team again. High-octane offense, great points per game defense, but they do need help, again, with turnovers, starting corners, and O-line production, a common thread we've seen tonight. And then also Nevada, Jay Norvell, I think is my pick for Mountain West Coach of the Year, and then quarterback Carson Strong should be Mountain West Player of the Year. Even if Nevada doesn't end up beating probably Boise State in the championship game, Nevada's going to be a hard team to beat this season. They did have a lack of forced turnovers on defense and a lot of sacks allowed by their O-line, but pretty much the only problems on this team that I think is a very sneaky good team. I like Nevada this year. Looking to MAC for some MACtion, baby. Can't wait for some Tuesday night football. Toledo averaged 35 points per game last year. Very solid. They have great running back play, as they usually do. All 5 offensive linemen coming back. This will be probably the best O-line in the MAC conference. Defense was great. To be fair, they had a small sample size because of COVID, but did need a little bit of better red zone performance. But yeah, Toledo's going to be good. Ball State as well. Last season stunned Buffalo to win their first MAC title since '96, which you pointed that out earlier about them getting the title game. They have 17 starters returning. They do visit to Wyoming in week 3, which I think is going to be one of the most weird fun games. Ball State at Wyoming. Honestly, I think it's going to be fun. I will be watching that game. I think
Always
Wyoming's actually a pretty
Laramie.
good team too. No, they're going to be decent this year. I really think so. Starting quarterback Drew Pitt and a great wide receiver duo make this offense just a hair behind the best in the conference. But again, all 5 starters returning here. Secondary still vulnerable on defense, but very good in takeaways. And this linebacker unit for Ball State is excellent. And then Conference USA, UAB. One of the best defensive units in all of G5. Still very good lines on both ends. They'll be a lot of fun to watch. Marshall won the division last year despite a late season collapse. So quarterback Grant Wells may be one of the best in the conference, but they did lose their leading rusher. But yeah, Marshall fell off really, really hard at the end of that there. Also, speaking of good defense, UAB is up 17-0 after halftime against Jacksonville State. So they won't let them do anything. Next up, Sun Belt. And lastly, in conference look, Sun Belt to finish our 10 conferences. Coastal Carolina, they were the Cinderella and the love of ESPN and everyone else in 2020. The Chanticleers are going to return a lot of talent. This is going to be fun. Quarterback Grayson McCall will lead the way, as amazing as a freshman last year. All 5 O-linemen are back, and their best wide receiver, and their tight end. Now, the red zone defense is their only concern on that stacked team, but out of conference schedule, Citadel, KU, Buffalo, UMass. Chanticleers may go undefeated this year. This will be a really fun team to watch. And then lastly, we have Louisiana. 3 straight Sun Belt Conference trips, but still no wins. Technically did get a half win last year with the split conference title, which was stupid, but technically haven't outright won a game. The great offensive core here. Receiving core doesn't really have a number one option so far, though. Only 19 sacks made last year, and the run defense wasn't great, but the pass defense on this team is unbelievable. Matchup with Coastal Carolina on October 2nd. Watch out for that game. That's
Can I give you a prediction?
Or so.
Can I give you my prediction, my bold prediction? And I've made several of them, but this is my number one bold prediction in terms of confidence. Louisiana is going to beat Texas week 1.
I think they may. I mean, Texas.
I think
Texas
they're going to.
Texas would be the team to overlook them, especially after the SEC thing and walking on in like
Texas
we're going to be those guys.
loses their opening game every year. It's just a given unless they play freaking, I don't know, South Dakota State, who they might lose to the Jackrabbits as well. If you play Texas week 1, you get the easiest version of Texas because they never have their shit together week 1. Just remember BYU, Maryland, all of these teams have beaten Texas week 1 within the past 10 years. What's to make you think that the Ragin' Cajuns can't come into Austin and make a little bit of noise?
Yeah, it's hard to really love a lot of that that's going on, but Texas just proceeds to disappoint every year. Looking up things that don't disappoint, which is kind of said a little bit in jest because they screwed up every year, but the playoffs are last thing we have here on the preview, which makes sense as that is what the year ends with. And what I got here as my playoff teams, and I know we'll have some crazy calls here, some really truly insane predictions, crazy stuff. At number 1, and again, I also think a lot of this could change, but at number 1, I'm still going to be sticking with Alabama. I think they're going to win out and get some big wins. I think if they do end up winning out, especially against how A&M is going to be this year, I think they'll deserve it. Next up with Ohio State, I think there's way too much, a stupid amount of talent on that team, as you and I both have mentioned. I think they're going to end up running the table pretty simply. And again, they have the schedule to back it up and get that. That Oregon game on that schedule is going to be a big boost to their resume if they want to get a little bit higher on that tier list. They end up going undefeated. So actually, if both Ohio State and Bama get undefeated, I think Ohio State might even deserve that number 1 spot. I don't know if they're going to give it to them, but they may deserve it. Next up, I have Oklahoma. Again, I really do believe in this Oklahoma team this year. I think it's one of the best Oklahoma teams we've seen in a while. Lincoln Riley can finally get his spot in, and I really think Oklahoma is going to be a serious threat this year. And then lastly, Clemson. I think Clemson's still going to be great. We know that they're going to destroy everyone in the ACC, and I think it may actually count for something a little more because UNC is actually a contender team. With that, I think Alabama is going to best Clemson, and I think OU is going to get the big-time upset over Ohio State, and Oklahoma will finally make a national championship game. But I don't think they'll win it, and I think Alabama for the first time under Saban will get there. Is it a three-peat if they win this year? Isn't that right? I think it is, right? They were 2019, 2020.
Did they win 2019? Why am I just blanking?
No, that was Burrow's year. Sorry, that was Burrow's year.
Yeah. I was about to say.
I was thinking 2018. I mixed the year up. Yeah, it's their first back-to-back championship they've had in almost a good while now. But I think Alabama's got the tools for it. I think they can get it again. I think that their freshman class they have coming in is absolutely ridiculous, and a lot of those guys are going to blow up. And I just really like a lot of what they have to bring to the table. Now, to be fair, I think if all these teams get there, I think Bama, Ohio State, and Oklahoma would have pretty much a three-way odds to end up getting really the title here. At least out of the projections I have it. I think they're all No. Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma.
No Clemson? That's what I'm saying.
I think those three would be better off, yeah. I think Clemson would be last in these four. I think Ohio State has more talent. I think Oklahoma will end up better, and I think all of them will have better schedules. If you're going to put them as it is, I think they three would be all fairly ahead of Clemson here.
All right.
No ETN, no Lawrence. I mean, they got a good team coming in, but they lose a lot.
They got DJ Uiagalelei. They got. Have you seen?
I don't think as good as Lawrence. I know, and I like him. I have nothing wrong. I know he went off. I have nothing against him at all. I think he's going to be big, easily ACC Player of the Year. But I also know that.
Have you seen my guy? Have you seen my guy, freshman running back Will Shipley? Dude is McCaffrey.
I trust
2.0.
you that Clemson is going to be amazing. Clemson will be very good. I just think these other teams could end up being better.
Okay.
I just think, and they have better competition to prove it because we know Clemson doesn't play anybody except for Georgia and UNC.
Yeah, well, I think Spencer Rattler is overrated. And to that point, I think Oklahoma ends this season with like 2 losses and still wins the Big 12 championship. My teams, in order, actually, I got UGA with the 1 seed.
Oh my God!
Winners of the SEC. Winners of the SEC.
They only get this
University
if they win out. They have to go 13-0, and then I'll believe you. If they don't go 13-0, Georgia, I guarantee you will not get the 1 seed.
Well, here's why I think they get the 1 seed. I think they beat Clemson this weekend.
So they win out. Georgia goes undefeated this year.
Yeah. I don't
believe
here's
that.
The thing. But
they're not going to get the 1 seed to go undefeated.
If Georgia has 1 loss and Clemson's 1 loss is Georgia, Georgia is still going to be ahead of Clemson.
And Ohio State's not going to win out?
No, Ohio State, they're not going to go undefeated. They're just not.
I think they're better than Georgia on that end. New
quarterback. Their defense was not great last year, and honestly, I think it got worse over the offseason. I think Ohio State's going to be great this year. I'm not saying – again, we're just nitpicking. We
still have them in the playoffs. You still have them in the playoffs.
We're nitpicking,
like dropping them out.
We're nitpicking everything this year.
Also, we are previewing something that's going to happen in 5 months. I mean, we could have a freak injury, God forbid. We could have, COVID. COVID's still a thing. Yeah. I mean, we could have games screwed up. We don't know.
Forfeits.
We're making our calls.
So I've got UGA, Clemson, Ohio State, and coming in at the 4th spot, over the 2-loss Big 12 champion, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide as a 1-loss non-conference winner.
I would hate that. That's the thing. You don't even understand how much I would hate this playoffs. If you had Georgia undefeated at 1.
It's happened before.
Clemson,
this is
no.
literally happened 3 years ago.
Georgia undefeated at the 1 seed?
Not at the 1 seed.
That's what I'm saying. This playoff of Georgia talking so much mess at the number 1 seed undefeated, Clemson at 2, like my biggest ACC team I hate now, especially being at Syracuse, and then Ohio State at 3, and then Bama somehow rolls in anyway. Oh my God, I pray you're wrong.
With the exception of the Joe Burrow year, the college football playoff is literally just set up to deliver us disappointment year after year after year.
It's the same 5 teams. It's these 4 in Oklahoma that
exactly.
Or my 4 plus Georgia.
So I've got UGA, Clemson, Ohio State, Bama. I've got UGA beating Bama and playing, get ready for this, a rematch against Clemson, because what's the only thing more disappointing than having the same 5 teams in the playoff every year is having those teams rematch a game that they played in the regular season for the national title.
You're doing this on purpose, I swear. You're doing this on purpose.
I am doing it on purpose. I'm trying to think of what outcome would piss me off the most. And this is
me.
it. This is it.
I honestly,
year we do it every year. We get pissed off about the playoffs every single year.
You know, because this is live and this is on video and this is being recorded, I'll say it right now. If this is the matchup in the national title game, I'm not watching a single minute of it. I'm not watching 1 minute of this game.
Wow.
Because to me, the winner doesn't matter. Because the winner is just someone I hate and want to lose. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's UGA Notre Dame in the national title would be worse to me personally. That would be worse. That's the only matchup that would be personally worse to me. But this game, I swear to you, I will say it right here, right now, and you better hold me to it. I'm not going to watch a minute of it if it's this matchup because we know Notre Dame's not going to get there. So,
if
I'm not doing it, no way.
You'll just watch the StatCast on.
I'm going to watch the FCS quarterfinals that are on at that time. I don't even care.
Look, if there's one thing we know about the playoffs, it's that, or as college football in general, as a result of the playoffs, is that games don't matter. And none of this actually matters. And it's going to be the same 4 teams at the end of the year. It's a nihilistic point of view, but that doesn't make it untrue.
But it's true. It's true. No, college football, I swear, it's like the most and least fun thing ever because it's so fun and amazing. And the spirit of it is like nothing else. And going to games, I mean, even I know being Syracuse now that it's not the most premier college football in the world, but you still have the Carrier Dome and you still have like Clemson coming in and there's still so much fun with it, even for a team that's not even that good. And knowing that even at TCU, a team that tended to be average to pretty good over the times we saw them, and we had a couple of really good years, that the energy of it's unmatched. There's nothing like college football, especially I know us being Southern may be a little biased, but I'll still stand by that. But it's still, that's what kills me so much, that when you don't have like a March Madness format that's not saying you need to have that exact same thing, but you have a format that fits your sport perfectly, that encapsulates it so well like March Madness does. Or even when the pro leagues, much to be complained, still do playoffs really well, and you still love watching all that. But it's just
the NFL just added another playoff team. The NFL added a 7th playoff team before the college football playoff with 140 plus possible teams.
There's only 32 to choose from the NFL.
Four teams are in the college football playoff. The NFL playoffs now feature 14. This is outrageous.
The craziest thing is people will still sit there and fight tooth and nail and will still fight that expanding the playoffs makes the competition worse. And I'm like, it defies logic. It's the opposite effect. I was like, why would it?
Yeah.
Upsets now can happen. You're allowing upsets to occur. And if they don't, then okay. No one.
And what's wrong with it is everyone's going to say, well, Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State are just going to beat the hell out of these smaller teams if we let them into the playoffs. Yeah, that might be true for 3 years until the recruiting.
You're guessing that.
but I'm saying
it's all assumptions.
I'm saying I am fairly confident that yes, Alabama and Ohio State, if there was a 12-team playoff now, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State would thoroughly crush every other team in a 12-team playoff now. But that is a result of them being in every single playoff and getting an exponentially higher blue chip ratio than any of these other schools. So it's a failed system
succeeding. Yeah.
What you have to do is expand it to 12, let Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State beat the hell out of these other teams for 3 or 4 years until those other contending teams' blue chip ratios catch up. Because that's what we have to do right now is we have to expand the opportunity in order to give other schools a chance to get some of these players who just want to be in the playoffs on the highest stage playing for an NFL factory school.
So my last question for you, but I do agree. My last question for you, as we can close this out. My last question: will Kansas win a game?
Oh, who's on the schedule? We got to see this.
South Dakota at Coastal, Baylor at Duke. God, Duke's bad. Please don't watch that game.
Duke,
everyone watching,
Kansas Duke is the toilet bowl of the year. That is the worst game of the college football season.
It's worse than South Dakota.
It's so much worse.
Then at Iowa State, Texas Tech, OU, at Oklahoma State, Kansas State, at Texas, maybe, at TCU, which we won't make that joke, and then West Virginia at home.
Okay, I think they could beat South Dakota. And I say that knowing nothing about South Dakota. So that's the only reason I say that, because every other game on this schedule is a loss.
The thing is, though, I think they actually did play before, if I'm not mistaken. It was sorry. It was Kansas State played South Dakota, and Kansas State won by like 3, like 2 years ago. I was thinking it was them. Never mind. But remember, Kansas lost to Nicholls State. What was it, like 2 years ago, last year or something? So I mean, they are not afraid. Kansas is not afraid to lose.
They'll play anyone.
No sense,
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. They'll lose to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And that's gonna do it for this episode of the Blanket Coverage Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to a marathon of a podcast. These previews are never short. I am going to go get some dinner after this. I am very hungry personally. Just a little
I am as well. I didn't eat
fun fact. So we're going to go fuel our bodies. We will be back next week. I am out all weekend. So we will be back next week. We are going to try to record these on Wednesday pretty consistently. That seems to be the best time for both of our schedules, which can tend to be pretty sporadic with just the nature of our jobs. But until then, I am Noah Parker.
And I'm Jack Wallace. Peace out,
y'all.